Hi, I'm Greg Gutfeld with Dagan McDowell, Juan Williams, Jesse Waters, and she does step aerobics on a Lego. Dana Perino, the 5. So who are the liberals blaming the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation on? The Electoral College. Yep, it's just not fair, and it's so old. Those stupid founders just aren't as smart as Rob Reiner. Plus, how is it that states each have 2 senators? New York and California should have 25 each, and you guys at home, zilch. Failing that, there's always impeachment.
Can you rule out this idea of impeaching Kavanaugh?
This whole impeachment thing, you know what? I'm very focused on the here and now.
But you won't rule out impeachment. We've only had one justice.
Jerry Nadler is not ruling out impeachment, but...
Is that a mistake, though? I mean, did we really want, after we just went
I'm
through all
much
this,
more
go
focused on what we need to do, which is we need to get to the polls, truly.
So you want impeachment? Why not just re-elect Trump while you're at it? And let's not forget the real enemy, white women. The New York Times blames Kavanaugh's win on gender traders, and that white women benefit from patriarchy by trading on their whiteness to monopolize resources for mutual gain. What the hell does that mean? Seriously, who talks like that and has a job? And so the left devours its own, as rage bots only see dissent as evil. And yet, as they sharpen the pitchforks, the Dems still haven't disowned Avenatti, who used women as stepping stones to the spotlight. So it seems we're at an impasse, which is French for nowhere good. One party says you must believe all allegations. The other says we should presume innocence until proven guilty. On one side are these women, and on the other side, this dame. What's the solution? It's simple. If the Democrats believe or prefer belief over due process, then put a ring on it. If you feel that all allegations must be believed, then from here on in, Democrats should believe any allegation against themselves, because 50% of believing is better than none. No process, just punishment for you. And the rest of us idiots will rely on stupid stuff like evidence and due process. Make sense, Democrats? Become the party of the pitchfork. Maybe then we'll believe it's not just politics. Dagan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. I have an idea. We should have an Impeach Olympics where everyone gets to try to impeach each other. It'll be like human chess.
I love that idea. But they can't. This is why they talk about impeachment, because they have nothing else. Their agenda is anti-Trump or even anti-woman, I would argue, because what kind of senator is Mazie Hirono to sit there and let that anchor man coach her like that?
He was mansplaining.
Well, that's part
and manspreading.
But they always overstep, the Democrats do. They did it with the border. You know, people were rightly upset about the separations at the border, about families being separated. But then that goes immediately to abolishing ICE. And what they've done here is strikes even more closely to the core of American values. Because as you pointed out, due process has been thrown out. The idea of just fairness in this country has been trampled on, and if you're a man, you're guilty until proven innocent, and if you're a woman, you just better shut up and act as a monolithic group and follow what the Democrats tell you, and people are rejecting that across the board.
Juan, I know that you've said this to me. You look at North Dakota, and you'll go, why do they have 2 senators? You've said that to me. I think that's a direct quote. So you think that this is fundamentally unfair, right?
What?
That each state has 2 senators when they are less populated.
No. I like it. What I don't like is, and I think what I have said to you is that 18% of the country is represented by the majority of the Senate. So in other words, 82% of the American people are not represented by that majority.
Right.
And I think a lot of people feel that this boils down to tyranny. And I think that's the word that you were citing before. But in this case, I think the people who most enjoy talk of impeachment are Republicans, because it stirs up their base.
I agree.
They're always talking about it. You look at the leadership on the Democratic side. You can go to Schumer, you can go to Pelosi, I can keep going. They don't talk about it. There are some people on an element, the left flank of the Democratic Party, and here I'm talking about especially newly elected, they haven't quite been elected yet, but winners on the Democratic side, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Lisa Presley up in Massachusetts, who say, hey, listen, it's time for the Democrats to be as strong, as consistent, as bullish as you saw from Mitch McConnell when he just ran over everybody, held a Senate seat open. I'm sorry, Supreme Court seat open, despite the fact that you had a twice-elected president.
That's our next block, Juan.
So I'm just saying, if the Republicans play hardball, then you get people on the left, especially coming up, who say, hey, Democrats, stop being so squishy. Go after those Republicans.
And then you end up with an Avenatti who actually goes too far and destroys your party. Dana, I bet you have a good point about why the Electoral College is important and why people who don't like it, it's really a classist argument because they want to rely on a metropolitan candidate at the expense of small towns, rural areas where you're from.
That's right. You know, Wyoming
yes.
has 2 senators but only 1 representative in the House. In the House. So I've done a little bit of work on this because I keep seeing it pop up over and over again. It started in, for me, I really noticed it in 2000.
Right.
Bush v. Gore. Like, this is unfair. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who Juan just mentioned, she tweeted this weekend that the Electoral College is actually racist. She suggested that the Founding Fathers wanted to protect slavery.
Right.
And that's why they came up with the idea of the Electoral College. That is not true.
No.
There is no evidence of that at all. And besides, Abraham Lincoln, who was president that ended slavery.
Right.
He did not win the popular vote. He got 37%.
Good point.
But he won in the Electoral College. So, thank goodness for the Electoral College that helped end slavery.
Good. Wow. Excellent.
And you know what? If you're going to eliminate every institution that had its roots in slavery, you have to eliminate the Democratic Party.
There you go.
Because look at the history over there on your side, Juan. That wasn't too good. It was the Republican Party that ended slavery.
If I could add one
we should
last
move on, though, from that.
My last point on that is that, yes, it is true that a lot of people are moving to states, a lot of the coast, California, Florida, Texas, New York. Those are really big states. But one, it's not how the founders intended, but also it could change.
Yeah.
You know, like if you get a really, like New York is seeing population leave in droves because of taxes.
I
Where
wish
they
that
go
would happen.
Other places like South Carolina.
And these things have a way of balancing out. If you say the Senate is tyranny, that's why you have the House. Or you have checks and balances. You have the White House, you have the Supreme Court, you have other things. Juan's saying that the Republicans, you know, they rammed it home so hard and the Democrats were a little soft. This is the first time I think Republicans showed up to a gunfight with a gun instead of a knife. And the voters are going to reward them for that. And the impeachment thing, I completely agree with you. It's going to fire up the Republican base. And the Democrats just look crazy and extreme. And after a while, the voters are going to say, health care, education costs, wages. What does an impeachment fight over a Supreme Court justice do for me at all? And I think the Democrats are going to get way caught out there, not really focused on what the actual people in this country think. The other thing is the Democrats and the media looked so angry and hateful and desperate, and we're just flouting all the rules and the standards of this country. The voters in America, I believe, are going to look and say, if the Democrats get power back after the midterms, they're going to go nuts with it because we've seen how dangerous they can be out of power.
You know what you're missing here is Supreme Court nominations mean something, and I think they mean something in political terms, Jesse. I don't think there's any doubt that people think that as of today with Kavanaugh on the court, if you look at abortion rights in the country, you look at gun control, you look at voter rights in this country, that there's a Republican majority, very conservative on all those issues, much more open to putting, well, in the case of abortion limits, in the case of voting rights limits, and in the case of, what was the other one I mentioned? Immigration. They're just going to rubber stamp any conservative
Maybe
Republican
now the
position.
Democrats actually have to elect people to legislate and pass these laws rather than using our judicial system to do them.
No, I don't think that's the issue.
So now that you have a court that's conservative, that's focused on the actual Constitution rather than making law through the court system and the judicial system.
Is it making law, Dagan, when you say women can vote?
That's not what
I think that's what happened. They had to amend the Constitution and view it not as strict construction.
I'm talking about not abiding by the Second Amendment.
What do you guys do? You guys like my idea that the Democrats should put their money where their mouth is and suspend due process for Democrats? Is that a great solution?
This is a silly topic. I can see that it delights you.
I think it's genius.
Yeah, because what? This guy he had his life on the line. If he was found guilty, going to jail. No, this was not about due process. This was about a test of character. Who was this man and was he telling the truth?
It was about character assassination.
Yeah, exactly. And the Democrats say that they want to be more cynical, like the Republicans. I actually think that this past 2 weeks has shown the most cynical, like an extreme of wanting to figure out a way to change the system in order to win. The other thing is, if they want to change the Electoral College, it takes like 2/3 of the Senate and 38 states. I mean, they're wasting their time if they're going to talk about impeachment or the Electoral College.
All right, let's move on, shall we? Yes, Greg, move on. Did everybody else hear that?
Got it.
All right, the Kavanaugh battle has riled up supporters on both sides. Will we see an end to the bitter rhetoric, or is this the new norm?
Oh, I just made that.
Highways and byways that'll take her anywhere but my way.
Let's use this week to give us all that extra energy that we know we have, to remember that the bottom line is that they may have the power right now, but we need to take it back.
I'm going to go throughout this country and let people in these, purple states, red states where Trump won, know what I thought, know what I think about this process.
Both parties trying to rally support from the base after the bitter battle over Brett Kavanaugh. But will Congress be able to move on from the intense partisanship? Republican Senator Susan Collins, who is coming under fire for backing Kavanaugh, says she has never seen anything like it.
I've had the honor of serving in the Senate for nearly 22 years, and this is as ugly a situation as I've ever seen during that time. I have had to have security because of threats against me and family members and staffers, and this has been unlike anything I've ever been through.
Even members of the media are finding it difficult to remember a lower point in American politics. NBC correspondent Casey Hunt pointing to retired Democratic Senator Harry Reid for starting the decline.
I've been covering Congress for 10 years, and I'm struggling to remember a point that feels lower than this one. People have real doubts about what the role of the Senate is going to be going forward. And, there's a lot of people you can blame for that. But your line of questioning about judicial nominees is really one of them. And it started with the Democrats and Harry Reid when he took away the filibuster for those circuit court judges. And it got lower when Mitch McConnell did it for the Supreme Court nominations. And I wish I could sit here and say that I thought it was going to get better, but I don't see it.
Jesse, she brings up Harry Reid. He's long gone from the Senate, but his impact is not forgotten. At the time, Senator Mitch McConnell told Harry Reid, don't do this. The consequences for you will be bad if you decide to take this action. They didn't listen to McConnell, and now they're reaping what they sow.
They are. The Senate's broken, and I think a lot of it has to do with, Harry Reid started it, but all these senators on the Democratic side of the running for president, there's at least half a dozen, and you have Sanders, Warren, Booker, Harris, Gillibrand, and they're really gumming up the works in the Senate for, purely partisan gain and to raise their own profiles. And I remember it happened on the Republican side, too, when Rand Paul, Ted Cruz were running, and they were going out and giving these long filibustering type speeches, and people were mad at them. So that needs to stop. And then you have Susan Collins, who needs full 24/7 Secret Service detail, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders needs a detail now. So it's really disgusting what happened. And I think what happened just in the last month or so is that you had the Me Too movement, which started out as a great movement, and America needed this Me Too movement. And then it seemed like the Democrats thought the Me Too movement controlled the country. And the pendulum swung way out there, where the Democrats thought any unsubstantiated, uncorroborated allegation against any man was legitimate enough to take him down. And the country said, no, we need a course correction here. And the Democrats got a reality check because the country doesn't want Salem witch trials. And if you look at the Senate races, this has not helped Senate Democrats. It's helped Senate Republicans. So they just better be careful what they wish for now. Kavanaugh said that. He was not talking about paying back Democrats once he got on the Supreme Court. He was saying, if this could happen to me, this could happen to anybody.
And we had sound bites there of Lindsey Graham and Susan Collins. Greg, for the last 6 nominations, President George W. Bush had 2, Obama had 2, and Trump has had 2. There are only 2 out of the 27 senators that were there for all 6 of them. And both Graham and Collins, they voted for all 6 of them. So it wasn't partisan in their eyes.
You have confused me.
Why?
I wasn't.
That was very clear.
It was clear, but you know me. I was like,
you said there would be no match.
You said there'd be no. You know what? I want to say something positive. I don't think this intense partisanship reflects America. I think, 2 weeks ago during the hearing, I looked at the ratings. It was an audience of something like 20 million, spread across 6 networks. Probably the people that were most intensely into it were 10 million. You're talking, I guess, less than 3% of the population that get really, really hyped up by this stuff. You get a larger audience from your average football playoff game, so that you just to put stuff in perspective. Also, the system is built to endure this sort of thing. In some ways, this is the kind of gridlock we want to cancel out the most extreme ideas. Lastly, there is a third way than picking sides, and that is what I would call the anti-mob party. Yesterday on Twitter, astronaut Scott Kelly had to apologize for quoting Churchill. Then, because apparently he was not a nice person. And then
because they say that Churchill was a racist.
Yeah, and
no. It was that he killed people, Dana.
Yeah, okay, that's it. But then let me finish. And then there was a young CNN reporter who had to apologize for stupid tweets from her college days. And these things share a commonality. They're being chased by the mob. All we're doing is we're targeting people we don't like. We have to be the anti-mob party. Anytime you start hearing people trying to crucify somebody, you have to go up there and say no. No.
Enough. We are awaiting remarks from President Trump. He's just given a speech. We're waiting for the tape. As soon as we get it, we're going to play it for you. You're going to want to hear it. It's about Kavanaugh and also something else, I believe, maybe possibly Taylor Swift. Juan Williams, Donald Trump had been fairly quiet during the Kavanaugh nomination. He's resisted until sort of that last week. But now he is definitely on a victory lap, but trying to make it clear what he thought about the politics of the last 2 weeks.
I think that's the one element that we haven't touched on in this segment is you talk about a divided country, and I think so much of it attends President Trump. He's the guy, he's the X factor that's been introduced. So we did have division before, I don't think there's any question, but I think he's exacerbated or worsened that divide. So the divide is so explicit now. I was looking at the numbers in our packet. It said 64% Democratic women believed Professor Ford, only 7% of Republican women. So there's a gender divide. I'm sorry.
But 75% of those in that same poll, I think it was the Cap Harris poll, said that they blamed Dianne Feinstein for basically interfering and withholding information.
I don't think she interfered, but I think that what you see is it gets in there. But, so when you talk about mob stuff, for example, I think it depends on which side you're standing on, which side looks like the mob, because if you're
That's why we must join together.
Do you know what? It was some Republicans finally taking a page from President Trump's playbook. They're going to stand up, they're going to hold firm, and they're going to get mad and push back on this false Democratic narrative.
Of what?
And that's exactly what they did with Brett Kavanaugh. They said, we're not going to stand for this. With the underhanded tactics, the sleaziness of what was going on. You saw Lindsey Graham get red in the face and start pointing at people. Susan Collins doing something that was in a different way. She was using reason, but she was just as much of a strong warrior.
And they didn't do that blindly, remember. Chuck Grassley sent out investigator after investigator to find these people, these alleged witnesses, and take sworn depositions from them. They offered to go to California to hear this person out. They spent hours and days and weeks trying to get the facts of the case. So it's not like they just blindly said, we're going to hold the line. They were remarkably open to hearing credible allegations.
I think you're rewriting history, but I'm delighted to hear it. It's always entertaining. But you're rewriting history because what happened was a Republican railroading of the FBI process.
What?
They didn't even get maximum time.
It was also
promised a week.
The time crunch was Feinstein's
No,
fault.
it wasn't.
Sure,
and let me just say,
every Democratic senator on that Judiciary Committee, every single one, hours after that Avenatti and the Swetnick allegations, which were implausible even at a glance. And her story didn't add up in her first breath once she went on TV with it. And every single one of those Senate Democrats on the Judiciary Committee came out right after those allegations and said Brett Kavanaugh needs to withdraw the nomination. But
before that, they were against him. Like before, when they got to name the nominee as Brett Kavanaugh, they were like, "We're out," because the vote was going to be this way no matter what.
Press release and it had just a blank space.
Jesse, I'm going to hold you there. We do have that tape from President Trump that we promised. Here you go.
I think it'll be very interesting. I assume most of you will be there for the official swearing in of Judge Kavanaugh, and I think it'll be something very, very special. I've always been told it's the biggest thing a president can do, and I can understand that. So it'll be very special. We just had a very nice talk. We actually get along, and really good talk. Yeah, I'm not doing anything. I don't want to do anything about that. I think we'll be treated very fairly. Everybody understands there was no collusion. There's no Russia. It was all made up by the Democrats. They're the ones that colluded with Russia. The Democrats colluded with Russia. And frankly, the previous administration didn't do anything about Russia when they knew that they should have. Yeah. You got to speak up. Look. I said that I was going. I'm not making any changes. You'd be the first to know. I'm not making any changes yet.
Are you concerned about this Fox journalist today from Bill that has been Turkey? Have you heard anything about that?
I am concerned about it. I don't like hearing about it. And hopefully that will sort itself out. Right now, nobody knows anything about it, but there's some pretty bad stories going around. I do not like it. Thank you. I'll see you at 7 o'clock.
What do you have to say to Taylor Swift now that she's in politics? Taylor Swift's jumping into politics. What do you have to say to her?
And what did she say?
She said she wants people to vote for Democrats. And not Marsha Blackburn, especially.
You know, well, Marsha Blackburn is doing a very good job in Tennessee. She's leading now substantially, which she should. She's a tremendous woman. I'm sure Taylor Swift has nothing or doesn't know anything about her. And let's say that I like Taylor's music about 25% less now, okay? Thank you.
So the president taking questions again. He took questions on his way to Marine One and now on his way back. Sometimes I wish he would repeat the question so that we could hear what they were talking about. But I think we picked up on the gist of it. He's going to the official swearing in of Brett Kavanaugh,
which is a very special moment.
It's going to be a very special moment. It's the most important thing a president can do. That's going to be at 7 o'clock tonight, and we will carry that live. He also said that he and Rosenstein had a nice and good talk today. And then he was talking about no collusion. And finally, he was talking about Taylor Swift. And, she decided to wade back into politics a little bit. Jesse?
That's right. I think Taylor Swift's endorsed Bresden, who's running against Marsha Blackburn in Tennessee. And, listen, President said she doesn't know anything about Bresden or Marsha Blackburn or anything like that. And this is actually what she said. She said, I've been reluctant to publicly voice my political opinions. I feel very differently about that now, as much as I have in the past, and would like to continue voting for women in office. I cannot support Marsha Blackburn. Her voting record in Congress appalls and terrifies me. Of course, this highlights Hollywood's hypocrisy because Kanye West is continuing to come under fire for his support of Donald Trump. Check out this moment from this weekend's Saturday Night Live.
What Kanye said after he went off the air last week was one of the worst, most awkward things I've ever seen here. He started by saying people backstage tried to bully him into not wearing it. He wore it all week, nobody told him not to wear it. I wish I bullied you. Kanye, I know you're like, yo, this is the real me. I'm off the meds. Take them. Being mentally ill is not an excuse to act like a jackass, okay? I'm quoting my therapist, my mom, and my mailman.
And Barack Obama. I think that's what he said about Kanye.
There's a big difference between these political statements by Taylor Swift and Kanye. Taylor Swift was a virtue signal to try to preserve her reputation among her peers. And I don't blame her for that because, she needs to maintain her relevance even though she's filthy rich. Kanye's the opposite of Taylor Swift in that he's stepping away to speak what he believes to be a truth. He may be right, he may be wrong, but it's a truth that his peers hate. And that's dangerous and it's brave. So what Taylor's doing is the opposite of bravery. It's not cowardice, but it's not brave. Whereas Kanye is a symbol of a greater act of sacrifice, the willingness to expend his career and his capital to challenge again, he is challenging the mob. And they don't call him Jesus for nothing. That's why, so here you have exactly the response, where some comic from SNL is calling him a jackass because he's willing to take the risk.
I'll tell you where the mob is. The mob is, we're going after Dixie Chicks. We're not going to run them on our radio
like
station.
10 years ago.
No, I'm just telling you. You asked who set the table here.
Yeah.
Who decides who's the mob? That's mob action going at. How about, when somebody like Ashley Judd or now Taylor Swift says, I'm going to stand up, even though the country music world may say, hey, we don't like liberals or whatever, and becomes adjusted, they're not going to allow this to stop them. That's an act of bravery.
She's not a country artist.
Well, no, she's a pop artist.
And she's not from the South either. She was born in Pennsylvania, which is worth noting.
But also, she said that she would be voting for Bredesen, the Democrat who said he would have voted for Kavanaugh. So I actually don't quite get. I can understand. Look, if she doesn't want to vote for Marsha Blackburn, that's one thing.
That was separate.
And Juan, why is it when someone like Kanye West, a black Democrat or a black American, goes out to the other side and says, I support the other side, someone on the right? Why is the attack that he's mentally ill?
Wait, that's not an attack. I don't want to get into any diagnosis, but the man
was... It's a joke.
It's not a joke. The man was in the hospital.
Okay, so you really think his quote-unquote mental illness, as whoever's diagnosed him, has something to do with his political affiliation?
When he's asked seriously about this, Jesse, when you have an honest, direct conversation with him, what he comes down to is, Donald Trump was willing to meet with me, and Obama was not. And secondly, I'm the kind of guy that just goes with gut and challenges everything, and so I just thought I would back Trump. I mean, there's no substance to it.
So I disagree. I mean, I agree.
Political system there?
One is correct, that the charm to Trump is that he takes meetings with people, and Obama wouldn't take a meeting with Kanye West, and actually did call him, I think he called him a jackass as well.
You know why? Because he insulted Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
That's true. That is true. So it all comes around. Yes. Having said that, though, there's the other relationship between Kanye and Trump is that they're both CEOs, and Kanye West has said it pretty eloquently that a CEO doesn't have the luxury of being eloquent when dictating things that he needs. And so he understands Trump's abruptness and his personality.
This is what goes back to that Yeezus thing that you were talking about with him. He sees himself as kind of, a prophet, a stand-apart guy. And it's not just from black
He is.
He sees himself as genius apart from the rest of the world.
You know what? You might be right.
I felt that way a few times.
Yes.
I want to go back to some of that sound from the president, who said, as Greg suggested, that maybe he was going to keep Rod Rosenstein around, that he was not going to fire him. They rode down on the plane together and had a great conversation. They were very nice. They get along swimmingly, as the president said. What do you read into that, David?
Well, I think that the president thought that New York Times piece that remember the whole story that said that Rod Rosenstein was going to wear a wire against the president. I think that cooler heads that could see through this as an attempt to try to get President Trump to goad him into firing Rosenstein, that it was a stunt, that it was instituted by McCabe, right, to try to cause all this kerfuffle, and that Rosenstein did not say, oh, I'm going to wear a wire. It was in the heat of the moment. He was like, oh, what do you want me to do? Wear a wire. He wasn't ever serious about doing that. And, if you're like somebody like President Trump, who looks at the media and says, you guys get it wrong so often that now he and Rod Rosenstein probably have a place to bond.
That's a good, and you know what? They did bond. And Trump's always about personal relationships, Greg. And a ride on Air Force One with somebody can really solidify that.
No, you know what happens? This has happened to me. Whenever you're on a plane with somebody who wants to talk to you, there's no way out.
Yeah, they're forced to be together.
So they just this happened to me when I worked the owner said, hey, you want to fly home on my jet? And I said, yeah, it's great. And then he sat there and he ripped me to pieces for 4 hours.
Juan, what do you think?
I couldn't leave.
Juan, so not firing old Rod.
Yeah, I think it's good news for the country. I mean, that's the one thing we always get into the tribal stuff, but I'm just telling you, I think that if he had done that, and then the thought is that after the midterms he's going to go after Sessions, who he said, he doesn't have an attorney general. Like, I just think, look, it's troubling enough that we have the president under investigation. Last week, the New York Times shows that there was tax fraud involved in his business deal. It's unbelievable. So I would
the New York Times said there was tax fraud, not the IRS. I just want to hammer that point home.
I had to listen to some of this left-wing TV on the radio when I was driving around the South over the weekend, and that is one crutch I would like to take away from people on TV who are Democrats and hit them with it, because it's so stupid. Here's the story. That New York Times story, that was decades ago, and guess who's still the President of the United States? States. Donald J. Trump.
All right.
Get over it.
Democrats doubling down on their hostility towards Republicans. The latest examples up next.
Justice Kavanaugh is set to start work on the Supreme Court tomorrow. But if you think that's enough to stop Democrats from doubling down on the hostility, think again. Senator Mazie Hirono defending the recent attacks against Republicans out in public.
Is it going after people at restaurants stop?
Well, this is what happens, you know, because when you look at white supremacists and all of that, this is what's coming forth in our country. There's a tremendous divisiveness in our country, but this is the kind of activism that occurs, and people make their own decisions. If they violate the law, then they have to account for that.
The negative rhetoric coming from the top down. In a fundraising email, DNC Chair Tom Perez urged supporters to make Republicans, quote, pay a price for Brett Kavanaugh. And a writer for The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, Colbert, coming under fire for tweeting, whatever happens, I'm just glad we ruined Brett Kavanaugh's life. She later removed the tweet and apologized. So that makes it all go away. Now they're sorry. Doesn't that sound like what the Democrats criticized President Trump for doing? Because they're inciting violence.
Yeah, it's weird. Last week, Brian Kilmeade was harassed on the street by 2 Netflix employees who followed him all the way to the subway, then got onto the subway, and this is where it gets really bad and dangerous. They encouraged subway riders to harass Kilmeade. So it got almost to an unsettling, violent point where they were, get this, instilling a mob, crucify him. That's what they were yelling. And I guess Netflix is the role of Pontius Pilate because they enable this sort of thing. The Democrats need to take the leadership role here and tamp down the rhetoric because you're going to end up, the Dems are going to lead their supporters to a Waterloo. If you're going to end up in a hostile situation, the side that can defend itself always wins. And you saw the McGregor fight where you saw these guys fighting and there were casualties. And why? Because you never know what a stranger can do. So when you're following a guy home and you're spitting on people, you never know who that person is.
Well, it is remarkable.
And I'm for peace, by the way.
I'm for McGregor.
We referenced it, I think, in the A or the B block that there was a political article today saying that Democrats think they need to be meaner and more cynical in order to help win elections, which I think is actually the opposite of what's true. However, I talked to a friend who is a political consultant, does a lot of Republican races across the country, mostly in suburban districts. And she said, yes, Kavanaugh has energized Republicans, but she worries that for every Republican energized, that 1 or 2 independents or soft GOP were also energized, but in the direction against the Republican Party. So I think a lot remains to be seen as to what happens and how much of an effect this has on the midterms.
Yeah, but this will, Jesse, this will energize Republicans or even who are people who are just right of center if they feel like, and let's call this what it is. They are talking about violence. They're talking about going after people. What is the line? We're coming for you at work, at your home, where you sleep, where you eat, where you shop. That's the line, and that's exactly what they're doing.
That's why I shop online, Dagan. They can't get me in the stores. And I do full serve at the gas station. Never get out of the car. I don't want Maxine Waters running after me. Could you imagine if, let's just flip the script for a second. What if, like, Steve King, congressman from Iowa, came up and said, we got to get in all these Democrats' faces where they live, where they work, where they fill up their gas. And then all of these paid protesters, they were getting money from the Koch brothers. They started getting in the faces of high-profile Democrats. Could you imagine what the media narrative would have been then? Because the Tea Party, I think they held a few peaceful rallies with permits, and the media said that they were armed insurrectionists.
And they picked up after themselves, not like Antifa.
Right. And they never invaded the halls of Congress and started ambushing people in the elevator, screaming hysterically during hearings, and chasing people around. No. So it's a total double standard when Republican activists, take it to the streets, and when Democrat activists take it there.
What are they trying to get out of this? Because I read this very clearly, whether it's Mazie Hirono or Tom Perez, or even some writer for Colbert's show.
As what?
No, that they're basically calling for violence.
No, they're not. I think you're really trying to hype it again. I think that serves some Republican purpose in terms of grievance or victimization politics. That's not what's happening. What you see here is Democrats finally saying, hey, we should stand up. People should go vote. This is not serving the interest of the country. This is not about a social compact. This is just bull rush Republican politics. You can go back to the 2000 election. Hey, Al Gore said, you know what? The Supreme Court, a Republican majority, ruled for President Bush. Let it go. Swift vote John Kerry. Let it go.
I agree with you.
So I mean,
take the energy and vote.